Hello, and welcome to this segment of our mini-series on Psalm 23. Today we'll be focusing on verse 3. Just a reminder, if you haven't tuned in to the earlier videos, you may enjoy viewing those prior to this one for context and a sense of where we're heading. Thanks for being with us wherever you are today. Let's begin by prayerfully entering into the psalm in its entirety. Today, I really encourage you to simply close your eyes and use all of your senses to imagine the scene in this psalm. As you listen, what do you hear, see, feel, smell, and even taste? We invite God, our shepherd, and our divine host into this time together, and we ask for the grace to be present to God's voice stirring in us as we hear the word. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want. Fresh and green are the pastures where the Lord gives me repose. The Lord leads me near restful waters to revive my drooping spirit. The Lord guides me along the right path. The Lord is true to the Lord's name. If I should walk in the valley of darkness, no evil would I fear. You are there with your crook and your staff. With these you give me comfort. You have prepared a banquet for me in the sight of my foes. My head you have anointed with oil, my cup is overflowing. Surely goodness and kindness shall follow me all the days of my life. In the Lord's own house shall I dwell forever and ever. And as we continue today, consider coming back to the imaginative sensory space we just shared in prayer. Those questions of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, and touching. I'll reread verse 3, which is our focus in this segment. And as I do, I ask you to remember that the first half of the scene here is from verse 2, where the Lord leads me to restful waters. So verse 3 continues, to revive my drooping spirit. The Lord guides me along the right path. The Lord is true to the Lord's name. As you likely noticed, this verse continues the shepherding imagery with which the psalm starts. We and the speaker continue to follow our shepherd along on this pilgrimage. We learn more about the nature of the pilgrimage and the nature of God. So let's focus on the first verb in verse 3, revive. In the Grail translation of the Psalms, we hear the psalmist say, revive my drooping spirit. Other translations interpret this as God renews my life, God gives me strength, or God restores my soul. Listen again and ask yourself if you find yourself gravitating towards one or another translation. We are led to the still waters so that God revives my drooping spirit, renews my life, gives me new strength, and restores my soul. How do you connect with this section, if at all? What experiences have you had where your spirit was drooping, or where your soul needed restoration? What do you need in order to experience new strength and life? Many of us are wearied by the ways the pandemic has changed our lives. Not being able to be with friends or loved ones in person to the same degree perhaps, or feeling the weight of global suffering brought to light because of the pandemic. Others may feel that this time of quarantine and social distancing has actually given them the opportunity to witness God working in their lives in restoring ways. Perhaps it's been a mixture of both for you. Another way to enter this text prayerfully might be to bring these reflective questions back to the wider, communal stage. As a family of faith on pilgrimage, is our communal spirit drooping and in need of still waters? What about the spirit of our local and national communities? Where are we being invited to pause and enter into stillness so that we might be strengthened? Whereas the first part of this verse then focuses on restoration, the second reminds us of the shepherd's guiding care, guiding us with a purpose, to be on the right paths. Once again, the path is an image of pilgrimage and journey, which is also reflected in the broader structure of the psalm itself. We are in the heart of the psalm here, just about halfway through, and reminded of God's guidance. What does this right path mean? Some interpreters translate this as paths of righteousness or just paths, pointing to how the reality of relationship with God implies a journey to become more godlike, more righteous and just. What has the path of righteousness looked like in your own life? In Hebrew, the implication is that the path is circuitous, that on the journey, God guides us deeper and deeper into righteousness. It isn't something we achieve once and then call done. The verbiage in Hebrew is such that it makes a demand on the listener to pursue righteousness by following the shepherd's guidance. I think we often hear this psalm and might not realize this. We might idealistically imagine a harmonious relationship between shepherd and all of the sheep following along. Yet we know there are times we don't want to follow along the right path. There are times we wander off, whether willfully or because we aren't really paying attention. God certainly understands this about us, and we can always trust in God's shepherding care. God guides us along right paths, but we have to do our part too, to be attentive to the shepherd and the call to justice and righteousness around us. This verse comforts us once more with the shepherding imagery. Poet Marilyn Nelson rewrites this verse to read, "You give me back to myself. Point me to the road toward justice, one of your sacred names." We're comforted to know God will revive our spirit and will return us to ourselves no matter the hardships we face or the ways we wander. We're also comforted to hear that God is true to God's name. In other words, we can trust God to be who God says God is, our shepherd, a God of justice and care. When we trust someone like this, we're safe and free to be ourselves. We can feel confident in growing, exploring, and challenging ourselves because we're grounded in a relationship of trust and care. As we conclude this segment, I encourage you to consider how God may be inviting you to take a step along the path of justice today.